now finished up milling and cutting joinery into our short rails. Our next step is to go ahead and cut the spindles, which are little slats that run along the ends of the table to kind of dress up the table and give it a little bit of decoration. So to do this, you're going to get some spindle material from us. Right? This is already cut to the correct thickness and the correct width. Your job is to cut it to a specific length based on your table. To figure out what that length is, you need to put one of your end frames or end assemblies together like this. The spindles are going to go inside of the grooves, okay, in the lower short rail and inside the groove that's on the upper short rail. We need to go ahead and measure that and figure out what that dimension is. Right? That will become the length of our spindles. So I put this all together and I'm going to measure from short rail to long rail, and I've got 10 and 5/8. Okay, that's the distance in between these. Now I need to add the depth of that groove because that's how long the spindles need to be. So each groove is about 3/8 of an inch deep. So 10 and 5/8 plus 3/8 and 3/8, okay, is going to give me, what is that? 10 and 5/8 plus quarters is about 11 and a quarter, 11 and 3/8, somewhere in that neighborhood. The length is not super critical. We just want to make sure that these aren't so short that they don't reach up into that upper groove here in our long rail, our short rail. So 11 and 3/8 is the number I'm going to go with. I'm going to go ahead and go to the chop saw, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut 11 and 3/8. Okay, I need 6 total spindles, so I'm going to go cut those right now, and then we will come back and talk about putting in the spacers so that we can align these along the width of the table and make sure they're nice and centered. All right, we've got our 6 spindles here. All right, they are going to go ahead and fit into our end assembly. Now, what we need to do is make sure that we put these in a location, okay, that is centered on the width of the table. So these need to be somewhere in the middle. To do that, we have cut out spacer blocks for you. Okay, you're going to get 4 spacer blocks for each end. Okay, these are cut to a specific length so that the spindles are going to be separated by the appropriate amount. And then we need to figure out what the leftover is here and cut the additional spacers or the longer spacers out of some more spacer material that we will go ahead and give you. So how do we figure out what the longer spacers need to be, okay, so that we center our part? Okay? The way to do this is to take an end and remove one of the legs. And what I'm going to do now is build a stack of spindles and spacers. I'm going to start with a spindle, place that down against the leg. I'm going to put in a small spacer on each side, and I'm going to put in another spindle. And repeat, okay, with the second set of spacers. Cap the whole thing off with another spindle. Okay, and make sure everything, okay, is gently tapped down and nice and tight. Now, I'm going to put the other leg back on. Okay, you can do this. You don't have to do this way, but I like to do it this way. Tap everything nice and tight. Okay, make sure all the joinery is closed up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the distance from my last spindle to my leg here. Okay, and I'm going to measure that, and I'm going to come up with 8 and 5/8. Okay, somewhere in there, 8 and 3/4, 8 and 5/8, so somewhere in there. I'm going to take that number and divide it by 2, okay, because I want the spindles to be centered. So if I know how much spacer material I need, divide it in half. I can put half on the left and half on the right. So I said 8 3/4 is my number. Okay, so I'm going to divide that in half and come up with 4 3/8 is the length of my other spacer. So I'm going to take my spacer stock, okay, that you're going to get from me or Mr. Stoles, and we're going to go to the big bandsaw and we're just going to measure 4 3/8, put a mark, and cut it off. This is too small and flimsy to be going on the chop saw. Okay, well, so we're going to use the bandsaw to have a little bit more control. So I'm going to go ahead and measure and cut these. I'm going to go ahead and cut 8 total because I have 2 ends to do. So I'll see you back here in just a second. All right, I cut all of my longer spacers. You can see I put them into the table assembly. I put one on the bottom, then I put in a spindle, then a spacer, spindle, spacer, spindle, and then the other long spacer. You need to make sure when you finish and you've assembled this, everything is nice and tight. Okay, and the other spacer, or the top spacer here, does not stick out beyond the rail. If it does, you won't be able to put your leg all the way on and tight to the rail here. So once you've got all this, dry fit everything together. Go ahead and put your other leg on. Okay, give everything a little tappy tap to make sure it's seated. Okay, and then you can stand this up, okay, and make sure that those look centered to you. Obviously we'll glue these in later, but this is now, because these are equal, these are centered, right, and they're held equally apart, okay, to give us a nice little decorative appeal or decorative look to our end assemblies. So next step, once we've got this, all of our parts made for the end assembly, is we're going to take some time and sand and clean up all our pencil marks and burn marks and things like that that we have on all of our parts, and then we're going to go ahead and glue this up into an assembly, and we will be ready then to move on to the bottom shelf and the long rails. So next video, glue up.